actually thought it was very much like Melbourne, so I brought my umbrella. I've got some good news and some bad news. I think the last time I spoke at one of these rallies was a couple of months ago, and I told you things were starting to happen, okay? The bad news, perhaps first, is that our wonderful Premier is built a concentration camp in Toowoomba, and it's open. And she'd probably like to fit all of us into it, but we hope, with the other bit of news I got for you, the good news is maybe we will put her there. Okay? Now, for those who don't know me, I am a practicing barrister, and I'm a former Crown prosecutor. And there has been, in the last several months, an alliance between a group of people formed. Most of these people are former law enforcement personnel, Queensland Police, Victoria Police, New Zealand Police, British Police, people who have left because they were conscientious objectors and they didn't want to subject themselves or their families to risk to their lives. Well, they've woken up. Most of them that are part of the group that I involve are people of great integrity, and they want to do their job, okay? Some of the good news initially comes now out of the UK. Those of you may have read or seen on video that the Metropolitan Police in the United Kingdom has now accepted formal complaints, not just in relation to the jabs, but also in relation to the Medazelam murders that have been ongoing before COVID even started. Now, the major instigator behind that is Mark Sexton, a former British constable. And he's gathered some lawyers and others around him, and they have laid a complaint. That complaint has currently been given an appropriate investigation number, and it's been assigned to a task force of metropolitan detectives headed off by a superintendent of police. Besides that current complaint that the police are now looking into, I am told as early as this morning that people are lining up at police stations and filing more and more and more complaints. For those who are looking for a job, the police are going to be recruiting again, but they're not going to be able to ask for jabs because they won't be able to do their work. But the reality is that there's been, in December, there's been a private prosecution filed, the beginning private prosecution, meaning that police are not involved. Private citizens in the British type of legal system may also lay formal criminal charges. Now that was filed by a fellow called Michael Obrenicia. Michael is a movie director of all things, but a very, very clever and astute activist who's been behind it. I have been asked to advise and review the evidence of the Medazelam murders that he has filed in Britain, and I'm in the process of finalizing that, and I am in the process of having times arranged to speak with the superintendent of police at Hammersmith, where the investigation is starting to start looking at the Medazelam murders. Now, those who don't know what that's all about, a very short thumbnail sketch is Medazelam is a drug that's given to people near the end of their lives, supposedly so they can die quicker. Not necessarily better, but they claim it is, but quicker. It is estimated that the numbers of people over the last 5 or 6 years that have been killed with Medazelam by the British, Australian, and New Zealand and Canadian medical establishment runs not into hundreds or thousands, it runs into thousands of people. And those complaints that have been filed in Britain relate to those killings. Also, I should indicate to you that the group that I am working with, and again I say, I'm speaking about across Australia, officers from Queensland, Victoria, from New South Wales, Northern Territory, and New Zealand are commencing to investigate the deaths of those people. And we will need help. So at the end of this, I'll give you some information that if any of you know anything, we would like you to communicate with us because we're collecting this information. The initial defendants are going to be the people who've administered those drugs unlawfully, either by force or deception. And that amounts to murder. Okay? So that's ongoing. And the good news is that we will be commencing investigation. Well, we have commenced investigations, but we are prepared to be laying formal private criminal prosecutions in relation to this type of corruption. There is a group that's going to be formally formed and created perhaps by the end of February, which sole purpose is privately, that is not as a government, as a non-government organization, to investigate, publicly expose, and privately prosecute corruption throughout the governments of this country, New Zealand, and Great Britain. The members of these groups are rapidly growing as many law enforcement officers are leaving the services of a government they no longer trust and are joining us to investigate the criminals in the government. Just to give you an example of how seriously corrupt the system is and how it's actually serving us, is that initially the police in this state, by the Chief Commissioner of Police, were told that those who had any medical, religious, or any other reasonable grounds for an exemption should submit those exemptions. I can tell you, as a matter of fact, none of those exemptions, and many of them worthy, were given anything more but a blanket refusal. However, shortly thereafter, secretly, but as no secrets can be kept forever, information leaked out that the Chief Commissioner of the Queensland Police gave blanket, I stress this, blanket exemptions, and I believe without even people having to apply, to all the senior officers in Queensland Police. All right? Now, I thank them for this because it's woken up the rank and file of the Queensland Police to the fact that they don't give a damn about them either. So now they're working with us, and this corruption will be exposed and it'll be submitted to litigation. So that's the good news. Things are happening. But let me make a further comment about the leading edge of this action, which has started in Great Britain in December, when the private prosecutions were filed, and subsequently when Sexton recently filed the formal complaints. They're moving forward. Our group here in Australia and New Zealand is working with the British together. And the information is being shared and it'll be rolled out over here. So what's happening over there will happen here. But it will happen here if you, the people who we do it for, support it. You'll have to stand behind us and support justice. The situation is that all of us who are doing this are volunteers. We're not being paid for doing any of this, but it's one of those situations where they say that if you can do something about as serious as this, then you must. It's not a question of commerce, profit, it's a question of survival of our society and our children. So we will be rolling out very soon, and it's already started in effect. There's people that are being interviewed, statements are being taken, documents are being collected to provide sufficient evidence for our prosecutors to review. And when the prosecutors find there is sufficient evidence for criminal charges, then those will be launched. The new organization that I am talking about is got a genesis in United States. There's an organization there, which is a non-government organization called Judicial Watch. And they do everything. They investigate and they expose the corruptions, incredible corruptions within the United States government system. Most of all, Department of Justice, FBI, and all the other corrupt systems that exist over there. And they're doing a good job. But you know what? They don't have what we have. They do not have the power to privately prosecute. The only way you can prosecute is through the formality of a police officer laying charges or a grand jury indictment. Well, we don't have that problem. We can privately prosecute. You, the people, can privately prosecute. And you will need assistance to do this, and that's why we've put together this organization. With your support, we will bring to justice every corrupt official that we find. And maybe that huge amount of money that's been spent in this wonderful detention center that Palashchuk is creating can then be used properly. So justice is coming. A lot of hard work has to be done, and we can only do it with your support. I'm happy to answer a couple of questions before I go off, because you need to go for a walk, I'm told. So if there's any urgent questions that you want to ask about this. Oh, there's one last thing I'm going to do. I've got to give you the details of who to contact and submit any information that relates. Sorry, this mic is dropped a bit. Can you hear me now? Okay. Just give you some basic information of what we're seeking. I'm not actually doing it. There is investigators that are waiting, standing by. So any of you who had the jab or know who have the job, we want to know if anyone was coerced. We need statements about the form of coercion, because that's a criminal offense. We want to know all the details. Whether or not they've had any adverse reactions, because that is the establishment of damage. Excuse me. Also, we're seeking any information about any vaccine programs people have participated. Witnesses about treatment or mistreatment or adverse reactions. Anything that anyone may have felt was wrong when they were witnessing any of this. Basically, I can't give you this number, but I can tell you what it is, and I think if you go on Tricky's website, it'll be there. But any of that information that you have, that you want us to look at and investigate and potentially prosecute, is at an email address of Lucy. Sorry? Yeah, do it now. Is Lucy, small b 4457 at Gmail. Now that address will be given to Tristan. He'll put it on his website. So if you've got anything you want us to know and look at, get it down to us and we will start to investigate it.
What's the name of the organization that you're in?
The name is in the process of being negotiated with Judicial Watch. We'll either become Judicial Watch or we'll become some form of Citizens Commission for investigation into corruption. The name is not settled. It's in the process of subject to negotiations with our American counterparts. Yes, I'll repeat the email address and I'll do it slowly. The name Lucy Lucy, B for brother, 4457 at gmail.com. But I'll give that to Tristan. Listen here. And that can be put on the website. The email address. So thank you, and we're looking to hear from you so we can get going on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.